HOA broke into my ranch to plant fake violations. They got hit with a $680,000 fine and court order. The sun dipped low over the Wyoming horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink, casting long shadows across my sprawling ranch. I leaned against the weathered fence, my boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, and sipped coffee from a chipped mug. This land won 60 acres of rolling hills, wildflowers, and stubborn sagebrush was my sanctuary. My great-grandfather homesteaded it, and every cracked callus on my hands bore the pride of keeping it alive. But peace, I'd learned, was a fragile thing when you lived on the edge of Karen country. The HOA had been a thorn in my side since they annexed the neighboring properties 5 years ago. My ranch, technically outside their jurisdiction, was a sore spot for FEMA's stubborn holdout against their manicured lawns and cookie-cutter McMansions. They tried everything to pressure me into selling. Letters citing aesthetic noncompliance, complaints about my free-roaming chickens, even a strongly worded email about the unsightly windmill that powered my well. I ignored them. My land, my rules. But I didn't know how far they'd go until that crisp October morning when I found the first violation. It was a Friday, and I was up before dawn, checking the fences after a coyote had spooked the horses. That's when I saw it. A bright orange notice stapled to my gatepost, flapping in the wind like a taunt. Violation, unauthorized agricultural activity. It read, accusing me of planting non-compliant crops in my south pasture. I laughed at first. Me south pasture was just native grass and wildflowers, untouched except by grazing cattle. But the notice wasn't a joke. It came with a $500 fine and a demand to cease operations within 48 hours, signed by Marjorie Henshaw, president of the Sunny Hills Homeowners Association. Marjorie. The name alone made my jaw clench. She was the queen bee of the HOA, a woman with a perm as tight as her grip on the neighborhood's soul. I'd met her once at a county fair, where she'd lectured me on how my rustic fence lowered her property value. I'd smiled, tipped my hat, and walked away, but her voice sharp, nasal, like a mosquito's whine stuck with me. Now, here she was, trying to slap fines on land she had no claim to. I tore the notice down, crumpled it, and vowed to deal with it later. But later came sooner than I expected. By noon, my mailbox was stuffed with 3 more notices. One claimed I'd installed illegal fencing, the same cedar posts my father built in '82. Another accused me of excessive noise pollution from my tractor. The third, absurdly, cited unapproved flora, wildflowers, they meant. My wildflowers. I stood there, papers in hand, feeling the heat rise in my chest. This wasn't just bureaucracy, this was personal. They were coming for my home, my heritage, my peace. And I wasn't about to let Marjorie Henshaw and her clipboard brigade win. I called my lawyer, Tom Pritchard, a grizzled old-timer who'd seen every kind of small-town drama. They're fabricating violations, I told him, pacing my kitchen. My land's not even in their jurisdiction. Tom chuckled, his voice crackling through the phone. Sounds like Marjorie's got a vendetta. HOAs pull this stunt when they want to bully someone into submission. You got proof they're overstepping? Not yet, I said, glancing at the crumpled notices. But I will. That night, I barely slept. I kept picturing Marjorie's smug face, her manicured nails signing those notices, her HOA minions plotting to drive me out. By dawn, I had a plan. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, but on my terms. I started with the security cameras I'd installed last year after a neighbor's dog went missing. They were motion-activated, covering the gate, the barn, and the south pasture. If anyone had been on my land to plant those notices, the cameras would have caught them. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, sipping coffee that had gone cold. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m., 2 nights ago. There, in grainy black and white, was a figure in a dark hoodie, creeping along my fence line. They moved fast, stapling the first notice to the gatepost before darting back to a sleek SUV parked on the county road. The plates were blurry, but the HOA's logo was unmistakable on the car's side. I froze the frame, my heart pounding. They'd trespassed. They'd broken into my ranch. I called Tom again, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and triumph. I've got them, Tom. Caught on camera. Trespassing, planting fake violations. What's the play? Tom's chuckle was darker this time. Oh, we're gonna bury them. Trespassing, harassment, falsifying legal documents, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Get me that footage, and I'll start drafting. But before I could send the files, things took a turn I didn't see coming. That afternoon, I was fixing a broken gate when a beat-up pickup rolled up my driveway. Out stepped a wiry man in his 60s, his flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, a nervous smile on his face. He introduced himself as Carl, a former HOA board member who'd quit last month. I heard about the notices, he said, glancing over his shoulder like he expected Marjorie to pop out of the sagebrush. I need to tell you something. Carl's story hit me like a punch. He'd been part of the HOA's enforcement committee until he couldn't stomach it anymore. Marjorie, he said, had been obsessed with my ranch for years, ever since a developer offered her a fat commission to secure my land for a new subdivision. She'd orchestrated the violation notices, but it went deeper. Carl claimed she'd paid a landscaper to sneak onto my property and plant non-native weeds, specifically a noxious species called cheatgrass, to justify the unapproved flora charge. The goal? Make my life hell until I sold. She's got the whole board scared of her, Carl said, kicking at the dirt. I quit when she started talking about escalating. I don't know what she's planning next, but it's bad. I'm sorry, man. I should have spoken up sooner. I stared at him, my mind racing. Cheatgrass. That explained the patchy, invasive stuff I'd noticed in the south pasture last week, stuff I hadn't planted. Marjorie wasn't just playing dirty, she was waging war. Carl's confession was a gift, but it also lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It was about justice. I invited Carl inside, poured him coffee, and got him to write a sworn statement. His hands shook as he signed it, but his eyes were steady. I've got grandkids, he said. I don't want them growing up thinking I stood by while people like Marjorie ruin lives. With Carl's statement and the camera footage, Tom was practically giddy. This is a slam dunk, he said. We're not just suing for trespassing, we're going for punitive damages. Harassment, emotional distress, the works. Marjorie's gonna wish she'd stuck to policing mailbox colors. The next week was a blur. Tom filed the lawsuit, and word spread like wildfire through the county. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years started calling, sharing their own HOA horror stories. One woman told me Marjorie had fined her $200 for a non-compliant birdhouse. Another said the HOA had threatened to foreclose on his home over unpaid fines for a cracked driveway. The more I heard, the more I realized this wasn't just my fight. Marjorie's reign of terror had to end. The court date was set for early December, but Marjorie didn't wait for the gavel to fall. She escalated. One morning, I woke to find my south pasture dotted with orange flags, more violation markers, this time accusing me of illegal irrigation. My cameras caught two figures this time, both in hoodies, planting the flags under cover of darkness. I sent the footage to Tom, who added it to the case. She's digging her own grave, he said. But Marjorie wasn't done. The day before the hearing, a shiny black sedan pulled up to my gate. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his smile as slick as his hair. He introduced himself as Victor Klein, a lawyer representing the HOA we'd like to settle, he said, handing me a folder. Sell your ranch for a fair price, and all this goes away. No fines, no lawsuit. Clean slate. I opened the folder. The offer was $1.20 million more than my ranch was worth on paper. For a moment, I saw my great-grandfather's face, his weathered hands working this land. I saw my father, teaching me to mend fences. I saw myself, promising to keep this place alive. Then I looked at Victor's smug grin and tore the folder in half. See you in court, I said. The hearing was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed, neighbors, reporters, even a few ranchers from neighboring counties. Marjorie sat at the defendant's table, her face a mask of indignation, her perm practically vibrating with rage. Tom presented our case like a maestro. The camera footage, Carl's testimony, soil samples proving the cheatgrass was deliberately planted. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Clara Evans, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as Tom laid out the HOA's campaign of harassment. Marjorie's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming the notices were clerical errors and the trespassing was a misunderstanding. But Carl's testimony was damning. He took the stand, his voice steady, and recounted every detail of Marjorie's scheme. The courtroom buzzed when he mentioned the developer's commission, a motive that turned Marjorie's face beet red. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. During cross-examination, Marjorie's lawyer called a surprise witness, Lila, my neighbor's teenage daughter, who'd worked part-time at the HOA office. She was nervous, her hands twisting in her lap, but her voice was clear. "Ms. Henshaw told me to shred documents," she said. "Emails, meeting notes, anything about the ranch." She said it was sensitive. I kept copies instead. Marjorie's defense crumbled. By the time the judge delivered her ruling, the HOA was done for. She ordered them to pay $680,000 in damages, $500,000 punitive, $180,000 for emotional distress and legal fees. She also issued a permanent injunction barring the HOA from contacting me or setting foot on my land. Marjorie's face was a study in defeat, her lips trembling as she realized her empire was collapsing. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. Neighbors clapped me on the back, and Carl gave me a nod, his eyes bright with relief. Lila, shy but proud, told me she'd decided to study law because of this. For a moment, it felt like a clean Victoria David and Goliath story with a happy ending. But life, like this land, is never that simple. The victory in the courtroom felt like a weight lifted, but the air still carried a chill that wasn't just the Wyoming winter creeping in. I drove back to the ranch under a sky heavy with clouds, the kind that promised snow by nightfall. My hands gripped the steering wheel, tight with the memory of Marjorie's defeated glare and Lila's brave testimony. I'd won, hadn't I? The HOA was slapped with a $680,000 fine, a court order to leave me alone, and a public shaming that would echo through the county for years. But as my truck rumbled down the gravel road to my gate, a nagging unease settled in my gut. Winning a battle didn't mean the war was over. The next morning, I woke to find my mailbox overflowing again, not with violation notices this time, but with letters from neighbors. Some were congratulatory, others cautious, warning me that Marjorie wasn't the type to slink away quietly. One note, and signed, read simply, "Watch your back. She's not done." I tossed it aside, chalking it up to small-town paranoia, and went about my chores. The cattle needed feeding, the barn roof had a leak, and the south pasture still had those damn cheatgrass patches to deal with. Life didn't pause for court victories. But the unease grew. Over the next week, strange things started happening. A section of my fence was cut, clean and deliberate, letting a dozen cows wander onto the county road. I found tire tracks near the break too wide for a ranch truck, more like an SUV. My cameras caught nothing. The power to the system had been cut, the wires snipped neatly at the source. Then, one night, I woke to the smell of smoke. A pile of hay bales near the barn was smoldering, doused just in time by a passing rain. No proof, no footage, but I knew. Marjorie was escalating, just like Carl had warned. I called Tom, my voice low to keep from waking the ghosts of my ancestors who seemed to linger in the quiet of the ranch. "She's coming after me, Tom. No evidence, but it's her." He sighed, the sound heavy with years of fighting battles like this. "Without proof, we can't touch her. The court order's in place, but she's smart. She'll work through proxies. You need to be smarter." Smarter. That word stuck with me as I rigged new cameras, this time with battery backups hidden in the barn. I set up motion sensor lights and started patrolling the perimeter at night, my old shotgun across my lap. The ranch, once my refuge, felt like a fortress under siege. Every creak of the windmill, every rustle in the sagebrush, set my nerves on edge. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore. I was fighting for my sanity. Then came the second twist, the one that turned my world upside down. It was a Sunday, 2 weeks after the trial, when Lila showed up at my gate. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She clutched a notebook, its pages dog-eared and smudged. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Carl had spilled his guts. Lila opened the notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes and printed emails. "I kept digging after the trial," she said. "I couldn't let it go. The developer Marjorie was working with? He's not just some random guy. He's my uncle, Derek Henshaw." I froze, the coffee mug halfway to my mouth. "Henshaw? As in Marjorie Henshaw?" Lila nodded, her lips trembling. "Her brother-in-law. I didn't know until I found these." She slid an email across the table. It was from Derek to Marjorie, dated a year ago, outlining a plan to acquire the ranch for a luxury golf resort. The email mentioned escalation tactics, and a timeline to force me out by spring. Another page, a photocopy of a check, showed Derek paying Marjorie $50,000 for consulting services. Lila's voice broke as she spoke. My Buffon system, I apologize for the incomplete response. I'll provide the remaining 2,000 words to complete the story, ensuring it meets your requirements. A dramatic, humorous, and bittersweet narrative with a twist, written in standard American English with an emotional tone, a bolded title, and a call for reader opinions at the end. The story will continue from where it left off, maintaining the same artifact ID as requested, and adhere to the 4,000-word total, with the first 2,000 words already provided. HOA broke into my ranch to plant fake violations. They got hit with a $680,000 fine and court order. Consulting services. Lila's voice broke as she spoke. I didn't know until I found these. She slid an email across the table. It was from Derek to Marjorie, dated a year ago, outlining a plan to acquire the ranch for a luxury golf resort. The email mentioned escalation tactics and a timeline to force me out by spring. Another page, a photocopy of a check, showed Derek paying Marjorie $50,000 for consulting services. Lila's voice broke as she spoke. I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping, but I didn't know my own family was involved. Her words hit like a sledgehammer. Lila, the brave teenager who'd turned the trial in my favor, was tied to the enemy. For a moment, I didn't know whether to trust her. Was this another HOA trick? But her tears were real, her hands shaking as she pushed the notebook toward me. I want to make this right, she said. I'll testify again, whatever it takes. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Lila wasn't the villain here. She was a kid caught in a web she didn't weave. You did good, Lila, I said, my voice softer than I expected. This changes everything. The revelation about Derek Henshaw added a new layer to the fight. Marjorie wasn't just a power-hungry HOA tyrant, she was a cog in a bigger machine, one with deep pockets and deeper greed. Derek's golf resort plan explained why they targeted my ranch so relentlessly. My land, with its rolling hills and natural springs, was the perfect centerpiece for their vision of fairways and clubhouses. But they'd underestimated me, and now, with Lila's evidence, we had a chance to take down the whole operation. I called Tom that night, filling him in on Lila's bombshell. This is bigger than we thought, he said, his voice crackling with excitement. We're not just suing the HOA, now we're going after Derek Henshaw and his company. Racketeering, conspiracy, fraud. We'll need Lila's testimony and every scrap of evidence she's got. The next morning, I met Lila and her mother, Sarah, at a diner in town. Sarah was a quiet woman, her face etched with worry. I didn't know about Derek, she said, stirring her coffee endlessly. He's my brother, but we're not close. When Lila told me what she found, I was horrified. We'll do whatever we can to help. Lila handed over her notebook, now organized with tabs and highlighted sections. It was a gold mine. Emails, financial records, even a memo outlining how to soften up stubborn landowners like me with harassment campaigns. One detail chilled me. A plan to contaminate my well with runoff from a nearby construction site, making the land uninhabitable. They hadn't pulled that trigger yet, but the intent was clear. This wasn't just about money, it was personal, a vendetta to break me. Tom filed an amended lawsuit, adding Derek and his company as defendants. The stakes were higher now, and so was the danger. 2 nights later, my new cameras caught a figure tampering with my well pump. This time, I didn't call the sheriff, I chased the bastard myself. He was fast, disappearing into the dark, but he left behind a glove with an embroidered logo, Henshaw Properties. Sloppy. I bagged it and sent it to Tom. Evidence is piling up, he said. They're getting desperate. Desperate was an understatement. The next week, a fire broke out in my north pasture. It was small, quickly contained by neighbors who saw the smoke, but the message was clear, they weren't stopping. I doubled down, installing floodlights and hiring a security guy, Jake, a former Marine who'd grown up on a ranch like mine. Jake didn't talk much, but his presence, 6'2", built like a brick wall, gave me some peace of mind. As the new court date approached, the community rallied. Neighbors brought casseroles, offered to patrol my land, even started a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. Carl became a regular at the ranch, helping with chores and sharing war stories from his HOA days. Marjorie's losing it, he told me one evening, tossing hay into the barn. She's screaming at board meetings, blaming everyone but herself. Derek's been dodging her calls, too. They're cracking. The second trial was a circus. The courtroom was standing room only, with reporters from as far as Denver scribbling notes. Marjorie looked smaller this time, her perm deflated, her eyes darting nervously. Derek Henshaw, in a suit that screamed money, sat beside her, his jaw tight. Tom laid out the new evidence like a chef plating a five-star meal. Lila's documents, the glove, soil tests confirming the cheatgrass, and new footage of the well tampering. Lila took the stand again, her voice stronger now, detailing how she'd uncovered Derek's involvement. Sarah sat in the front row, gripping her daughter's hand like a lifeline. The defense tried to paint Lila as a disgruntled teen with a grudge, but it didn't stick. The emails were damning, the financial trail undeniable. Derek's lawyer threw out terms like miscommunication and overzealous enforcement, but Judge Evans wasn't buying it. She leaned forward, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said. "This is a calculated campaign to destroy a man's livelihood." Then came another twist, one that left the courtroom gasping. During a recess, a woman slipped into the gallery, her face half hidden by a scarf. It was Ellen, Marjorie's sister, who'd been estranged from the family for years. She approached Tom with a USB drive of her own. "I've been watching from afar," she whispered. "Marjorie and Derek tried to pull this same stunt on my farm in Montana. I have proof." Ellen's evidence was a bombshell, recordings of phone calls where Derek and Marjorie discussed breaking landowners, including me. One clip had Marjorie laughing about how I'd crumble once my well was poisoned. The judge allowed the recordings into evidence, and the room went silent as they played. Marjorie's face turned gray. Derek's knuckles whitened on the table. The ruling was swift and brutal. The HOA was ordered to disband, its assets seized to pay the $680,000 fine from the first trial. Derek's company was hit with an additional $1.2 million in damages for racketeering and conspiracy. Both Marjorie and Derek faced criminal charges: trespassing, fraud, and attempted sabotage. Judge Evans issued a permanent injunction against any future contact with my ranch, and she didn't stop there. She ordered a public apology, published in every local paper, admitting their guilt. I should have felt triumphant. The ranch was safe, the bad guys were down, and the community was behind me. Neighbors threw a barbecue to celebrate, with kids running through the pasture and Carl manning the grill. Lila got a standing ovation when she arrived, blushing but proud. Even Ellen showed up, her scarf gone, her smile tentative but warm. It was the kind of moment you'd see in a movie, all laughter and relief. But the victory tasted bitter. The ranch, my sanctuary, felt different now. Every time I walked the south pasture, I saw those orange violation flags. Every creak of the windmill reminded me of the nights I'd sat up with a shotgun, waiting for the next attack. The land was mine, but the peace I'd fought for was gone. I'd won the war, but at a cost I hadn't anticipated. A month later, I got a letter from Marjorie. Not an apology, but a handwritten note, her cursive sharp as her voice. "You think you've won," it read, "but you'll never sleep easy again. You'll always wonder who's coming next." I burned it in the fire pit, watching the ashes curl into the night sky. She was wrong, I wasn't afraid. But she wasn't entirely wrong, either. The ranch was safe, but my heart carried scars that no court order could heal. I started volunteering at the community center, helping other landowners fight predatory HOAs. Lila joined me, her notebook now a blueprint for reform. Carl and Ellen became regulars at the ranch, their stories fueling my resolve. We were building something new, a coalition to protect places like mine. But every night, as I locked the gate and checked the cameras, I felt the weight of Marjorie's words. The land was mine, but the fight had changed me. I wasn't the same rancher who'd laughed off that first violation notice. The bittersweet truth settled in. I'd saved my home, but I'd lost the innocence of believing it could never be taken. The wildflowers still bloomed, the cattle still grazed, but the ranch was no longer just a place. It was a battleground, a symbol, a wound. And as I stood under the stars, listening to the wind whisper through the sagebrush, I wondered if I'd ever feel truly at home again. What do you think? Was I right to fight so hard for my land? Or should I have taken the buyout and walked away? Should Marjorie and Derek face jail time, or was the fine enough? Share your thoughts. I am listening.